Welcome to episode 66 of Reading Between the Reels. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're a new listener, we're so glad you found us. If you've been enjoying the show, please tell someone about us. Send a tweet, post to Facebook, write a review in your favorite podcast catcher, or just recommend the show to a friend. I'm Craig Dickinson. I'm joined as always by my co-hosts Corey Heitschmidt and Justin Eldon. What's up, guys?
How's it going?
Hello.
And today on the show, we're thrilled to be joined by Ian Doescher, a New York Times bestselling author and writer of several Shakespearean adaptations, including Get Thee Back to the Future. Welcome, Ian. Great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I've been trying to get Ian on the show for a while and trying to find the best way to do that. And we're going to look at Back to the Future today, which is a film we all love. And Ian wrote an amazing adaptation of it, as I just mentioned. So we're going to just go ahead and dive in. And Ian, I'm going to start with you. What are some of your overall thoughts on Back to the Future?
Oh, it's a movie that I grew up with, as I'm imagining we maybe all did. And so it's like a perfect movie, just about, right? I mean, it's one of those movies that like just ties everything up so nicely and doesn't leave any loose ends dangling out there. The performances are all so good. The writing is so good. I rewatched it in preparation for recording today, and I have a couple of nitpicks, but it is deservedly a classic. That's my take.
Nice. So, Justin, I'm going to hit you up next. What are your thoughts on Back to the Future?
Yeah, so I got goosebumps as Ian was talking because I completely agree. Like I watched the heck out of that thing as a kid, and then I'd seen it a couple times since I've been older, and then once before this recording, and yeah, there was just so much about it where I'm like, oh, I have not idealized this in my head. This actually is probably about as close to a perfect movie as you can get, just in terms of plot and acting and just general like development throughout the film. It is fantastic. I would have to try really hard to find anything negative to say about it.
Corey, what about you?
Well, hold on. First, I got to check. Justin, what years was this when you probably watched this? Because
now I don't want to.
He's the youngster in the group here. I mean, was this the 95 era that you were watching Back to the Future?
Okay, so I grew up in Arizona, and every summer we would go like take a road trip to Washington State. And for whatever reason, one summer we only had one DVD in the car, and like we had like one of those little portable DVD players, and the only DVD was Back to the Future.
Yeah.
So
yeah, okay.
On that like 20+ hour car ride, I watched that movie so many times. So yes. I feel a little car sick every time I watch it, but I still feel like a deep like nostalgia to it. Even though I was 3 years old when it came out, I probably didn't see
it
until
yeah.
This is going to tie exactly what my thoughts are.
It was 3 years old when I came out, is what I meant.
The mere fact that you're saying you watched it on DVD and not VHS, is concerning to me as well.
Yeah, I'm.
And that brings my ultimate thought right there, is because I think Back to the Future is, of all the movies that I've ever watched, one of the ultimate nostalgia movies for anybody who's seen it in the theaters or experienced any of them in the theaters. It takes you back to I don't think watching it today versus watching it, back in the 80s and even the 90s, Justin, is the same. It just has this feel of going back in time just to watch it now in 2023. That brings all these emotions that Marty's going through, brings you right back just to sit down and watch it. It is a time travel of its own just to watch that. And so I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that I take for Back to the Future. If it's on TV, I have to stop. Scrolling through channels, it's right there. I have to stop. I can't. It's like, oh my gosh, I got to watch just a couple minutes, if I have to. The chemistry of all the actors is absolutely perfect. The level of talent and what we're going to end up talking about with some of these things. But I would say the other part is, I think when I look at Back to the Future, I would say if it's not it would definitely be in the top 3 greatest trilogies of all time.
Okay.
I would have to rank it there. Praise. I don't know how to. Nobody nodded their head yes when I said that, and I'm a little panicked about it.
Well, now you've just got me thinking about other trilogies out there. I mean, yeah.
Well, and I struggle with that idea because, I mean, does Indiana Jones count as a trilogy now? Because I thought that one, but I'm like, nope, there's 4. Now there's going to be 5. So maybe I can't count Indiana Jones
movies.
Stop.
There's 5. And so, like I go back to the original Star Wars, number 1, right?
Well, so we're counting Star Wars as a trilogy now? And
it opens up a can of worms. This is the problem with time travel, okay?
Yeah.
But
I don't think this is the problem with time travel. This is not it. There's a lot of problems, but this isn't it.
This movie is epic. This is one of those, it is on everybody's bucket list. You have to watch Back to the Future trilogy. So
okay.
Now I feel like I need to list like trilogies.
Well, we may have to have an episode just on
That's
that.
a podcast we have to bring up.
Yeah, I think so.
Certainly.
Okay. Is it my turn? Yes. You guys stole most of my ideas. Yeah, it is an almost perfect movie. And, Justin, you mentioned watching it over and over again. I could totally watch this movie over and over again. Like it never gets old. And even though I know what's going to come up, it's like, it just fills me with nostalgia and makes me happy. Corey, as you were talking about too, about seeing it in the theater. I mean, I did see this in the theater. I think I was 9 that summer. And I remember my parents had already seen it and they never went to go see movies twice in the theater, but they went again with me and my brother.
Wow.
So that's a pretty big deal. And speaking of nostalgia, I remember there was a poster for The Legend of Billie Jean. That might even been playing at the same time. So that very much dates me at that time. But yeah, I love this film. I mean, it's the highest grossing film in 1985. Unsurprisingly, it was a critical hit when it came out. And now it's kind of transitioned into classic very smoothly. But the one thing I'll try and add to this is it was rejected like 40 times. The script was. It took them years to get this made. Like if Romancing the Stone wouldn't have been a hit for Zemeckis, this probably didn't get made. So that's amazing too. Just the whole perseverance thing, which is that kind of the, put your mind to it, that lesson, which we'll probably get to. Like that sounds a little bit autobiographical to me. So that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and dive into cinematography. And Ian, I'm going to throw this to you first. I know this is a little outside of your element, but do you have anything that you noticed for composition, color, camera work, anything that stood out to you?
So the thing that jumped out at me when I watched today is how much red, white, and blue is used as in combination with each other in shots. I started making a list of places that I saw it. Like notably, of course, Marty's costume, and I realize that's jumping ahead to costume, right? But he's in the jean jacket and jeans, the red T-shirt, red backpack, and then the white collared shirt, right? When you see the backdrop where they do the talent show auditions, with the Huey Lewis cameo, that's all red, white, and blue. The town is red, white, and blue. There's a sense that this is an Americana movie, right? Which is part of the whole going back to the 50s thing, right? So that just really jumped out at me. So that's the one thing I'll say.
Yeah, I love it. I hadn't even thought of that, but that's now that I hear you say that, I'm like, of course it is. That's working on us subconsciously the whole time.
Yeah, and also the other one was that I noticed again that jumped out at me. Biff's when he's in the 1985 scenes, right? When he walks in and he's talking to George and Marty, he's all in red, white, and blue as well.
Huh. Interesting. Do now I have to watch the film again? Awesome. Justin, what about you? Give me something from any of the categories.
So just in terms of like color, it was, and I didn't really notice this until Marty went back to the future, back to present day. But the 1950s, everything filmed in the 1950s, it was quite a bit warmer in terms of like tones and hues. Everything just, it felt calmer. And then when you go back to the 80s, everything was quite a bit cooler. The tones were quite a bit cooler and like a little bit more muted, not quite as vibrant. And that moment when Marty goes back to his present time and he's in the DeLorean, like immediately there's almost like a ping of sadness, like, oh, this looks trashed, this looks sad, this looks not great, but he gets out of the car and he's pretty excited about it. just generally color. There's a huge color shift. Even you're looking at the same scene, the same location, the same object, and it looks quite a bit different in the past to the future or present. Sorry.
Yeah, love it. Corey?
I absolutely agree with all of that. I think the thing that stands out to me, a couple things. You go back into the 1955 time, and I feel like it is more vibrant. I feel like it's more. They do a great job, beautiful job of making that stage and everything they set in Hill Valley just looking amazing. 1955. That was a time travel on your own, just to go back. And I remember the 80s. You always look back at the 50s as that old time. I grew up with my grandparents, and so I think. You always talked about that. I always watched old movies. I always saw that. So it's very nostalgic feeling. And then when he ends up back in 1985, it just feels dingier. It does feel a little dirtier. He crashes the DeLorean in the movie theater when he time travels back, and there's trash and paper floating around. It's just not the same feeling. It makes Hill Valley look a little bit, run down. But to go back into the 50s, you get that nice, I don't know, bebop feel with the music and everything, and so it's wonderful. So I really liked it. The thing I noticed this time watching it that really stood out to me, when he goes to the mall, you see the ground is wet and glistening, and because it had rained. But then when he goes back into 1955 with the skateboard scene, the roads are wet. Now they do that for an effect, but it stands out to me because the whole sky is blue and it's colorful and it's bright. So there's no way it could have rained, but it just stands out that effect for making the cars slide around easier for filming works. But it's something I never picked up on until you intentionally watch it with some of the things that we're taking notes on. So, but it is a perfect movie, perfect scenery, and they do a wonderful job setting that up with the location and the color.
All right, I got a question for you guys. Whenever I watch movies from the 80s, and right now Terminator is standing out the most to me, and just the amount of trash floating around the city, was there a litter problem in the 80s? What's going, or was that just how movies were made? What's going on there?
I mean, I think about that. It's like you're saying that as a joke, but then I think about when we were kids, right? All the "Don't be a litter bug" campaigns, right? And wasn't I might be making this up, but wasn't "Don't Mess with Texas" originally a litter campaign? Am I making that up, or was that originally seatbelts? Always seatbelts.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Anyway.
But I think that's true. That was the "Don't be a litter bug" was the campaign around the 80s. That's when that stuff, Justin, there was just trash everywhere.
Oh, okay. So I've always wondered, because I remember in Terminator when he originally goes into the past and he comes back from that sphere, there's just trash everywhere. I'm like, what's wrong with this city? What's wrong with the world? Okay, that's good to know.
It's filthy.
Nice. The thing that I want to point out, it's a beautiful film, but the thing that I want to point out was the editing so much with this. There's so many quick shots of close-ups. Just even beginning with the fact that this really slow reveal of Marty at the beginning, he walks in, the camera's basically on the floor and you see his shoes, and then the skateboard slides over and he hits the plutonium case, which is fun. You get that nice pan through Doc's office, or his house and his garage. Essentially, he's kind of merged them together. I've seen all the clocks and all of the product placement there. There's that one clock which we'll talk about in set decoration. It's like Harold Lloyd. Actually, I'll bring it up now. Hanging from the clock, much like Doc will later. So there's this foreshadowing thing there, and that whole sequence with him getting ready to play the guitar for the first time, and it's shot at the gauge, flipping, and then you see the pick and it glistens. It does that a couple times too, but I think my favorite one is at the end. I think it's a masterclass, just showing you what you need to pay attention to when he's trying to go back. We're waiting for the lightning to hit, and you just have things like the cable detaches, then Marty's shoes pressing on the gas, the cable's tearing Doc's pant leg, the hook on top of the DeLorean. It's just remember this. Just keep showing you all the hand of the clock moving immediately. Pay attention. It's genius. Marty's face, Doc's face, and I'm just. Yes, I know what to pay. It's just so great that these choice of these shots, and I don't usually, close-ups are generally kind of boring to me. It's just kind of we have to have them in the film, but the way they're used in this film, I think, is just brilliant, just to kind of convey the urgency of what's happening in that scene.
Well, and even that opening scene as it's going through Doc's workshop house, whatever it is, you get so much about the characters, especially Doc, in that what like 2 minute scene as it just pans around and there's so many little tidbits and things and so much character and world building in such a small little sequence. And I feel like every time I watched the movie, I would pick up something new in that just mess of props that they had there.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. So let's go ahead and move down to sound. So we're talking about sound effects, soundtrack, obviously the music, voiceover stuff. So Ian, we're going to start with you.
Oh, putting me on the spot again. I was reflecting as I was listening. Oh, it was the opening clock scene. Actually, as I was watching that, I was thinking, this just sounds so good. So there's that aspect of it. This movie has at least 3 of the best like needle drop moments for songs, of any movie. Right, the first Power of Love hit, the second Power of Love hit right after Jennifer kisses him and then goes away, and then the Mr. Sandman needle drop also, right, like that. I was thinking about how, you've just seen Marty McFly blow out a gigantic speaker, right? But like, they are introducing him. It's funny because his life is miserable, and yet they are introducing him as the coolest character ever, right? The Power of Love hits, and all of a sudden he's, on the skateboard, holding on to the cars. It appears like Michael J. Fox is doing a lot of his own stunts there, at least some of it, and so anyway, that, and then the soundtrack itself, like the Alan Silvestri score, very John Williams-esque. I thought, it just hits. No pun intended. Hits all the right notes in the scenes that it needs to. The adventure themes that feels almost like Indiana Jones-ish, and yeah, I can't say enough good things about the sound in this movie.
Justin?
Kind of taking a different approach here, not talking so much about the music, but just the actual sound effects themselves. I don't think the top 10 most iconic sounds would be like the DeLorean sounds. Just all of them. Doors opening, revving up when he actually hits 88 miles per hour, and that sound, I don't even know what that sound is. Out of context, it's actually probably a pretty terrible sounding noise, but within the movie, like it just makes you feel good. No, just generally, and again, maybe I have like a different feeling on this than you guys because it's been around my whole life. I didn't see it at quite the same time period you guys did, but all the sounds have just made their way into like the cultural lexicon, and I think most people, having seen or not seen the movie, would probably recognize most of that. And even a lot of the songs, I don't think I've heard outside of the film. That's going to date me again, but
yeah.
Like my mind has associated those songs with the film.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the DeLorean thing too, because I remember at one point I had a coworker that had a DeLorean, and I got to drive it once or twice, and was sorely disappointed because they made it sound so cool. Like the going doors don't sound like that when they open.
No,
and it looks kind of like it's going to be a sports car, but it's like a Honda. Mm-hmm. Like it is not powerful. It's in the little tiny pedals, and like it looks so cool. But yeah, so just I always. When I listen to it, I'm like, yeah, that's not right, but it's cool. I like that they did that. Corey, what about you?
Well, I agree. Like the DeLorean is one of my favorite cars of all time because of this movie. I mean, who didn't love a DeLorean at that time? And the sounds, I think the soundtrack is amazing. It is one of the most iconic music. I mean, the theme song for Back to the Future, theme song to Indiana Jones, theme song to Darth Vader. Those are just iconic, legendary songs. You hear it, you know exactly what it's from. And so I think that stands out. I think Huey Lewis and his cameo in here are absolutely brilliant. I've watched behind the scenes on that, on a couple of the DVD features where how they filmed that, and that was always fascinating. That Huey Lewis is, I'm sorry, Phyllis, you're just too damn loud. It's just incredible that Huey Lewis is saying that, and then and then you get such great music through this. The Sandman song. Then you go and you get Johnny Be Good, which is not just the most epic song now because of that. So I think they absolutely make a movie where all of the soundtracks are there, but then they also bring in some effects, like the DeLorean sound that Justin's talking about. That is just that sound of it revving up as he's accelerating, which the car does not really make, but it's an iconic sound. The gull wing doors opening up. And then my ringtone on my phone when you text me is the little chime that happens throughout the series. Because anytime that chime comes up, it's where time travel has somehow changed things. It's the something's different, something's changed. And so when I get a text message, my phone does that, and I'm always like, oh, something's different, something's changed. It's been like that for years because it's such an iconic sound, and I love it. I love that chime. So,
okay, again, you guys aren't leaving me much, but that's great. I love it. Silvestri's score is so great. It's such a big, epic score for what kind of could be a small movie otherwise, but it really elevates it. I love what you guys said about that. The diegetic music in this movie is really great too. And just going through this, doing some research this time, I was shocked. I'm like, Eric Clapton's on this. I had no idea that was Eric Clapton when he comes back to 1985 and crashes into the church, and the homeless guy is sitting on the bench. His radio's playing. That song is Heaven is One Step Away by Eric Clapton. I'm like, I love Eric Clapton. I've always liked that song, but I didn't know that was him, which is great. They also have like the Eddie Van Halen song, which says I think it just says Eddie Van Halen on it because Van Halen didn't want to actually do a song, which is kind of funny. But yeah, great things. Like, you guys mentioned Mr. Sandman, which is kind of like, can Marty hear that, or is that just for us? Which is kind of an interesting thing, but it sets the scene. Like, it does so much. It tells us what's happening with the music. We don't have, it shows us, like, we hear it. We don't have to go, hey, it's 19, like, it sounds like it's 1950s. He walks into Lou's Cafe and you hear the Ballad of Davy Crockett. You're immediately teleported. That, you also hear that Etta James song when George comes in. Night Train, when it starts the enchanted, the dance, Under the Sea dance. Just fantastic. Like you mentioned, Ian, these needle drops where you're just like, you're instantly transported to these times. Masterclass.
And that Mr. Sandman one, that's really when you get that first beautiful view of 1955. I mean, there's the farm scene at night, the night before, and then there's a little bit of Marty pushing around the car, that kind of stuff. But then, like, it's when you get Mr. Sandman, and all of a sudden you have the beautiful town where you get like what Justin was talking about with sort of the sheen that 1955 has on it in this movie, which reminds me a little bit. As Justin was talking about, it reminded me a little bit, I realize I'm stepping back in the conversation here, but about like Pleasantville. My vague memories of the movie Pleasantville, like when things suddenly go into color, and which then takes me back to even like The Wizard of Oz. Like when that goes from black and white to color, like it's all of a sudden this like, oh my goodness, we are really in this whole new world now. Anyway.
No, brilliant. Yeah. Feel free, just if something jumps into your mind, jump in. Go ahead, Justin.
That's the best part about this when we have these conversations, is that point right there, how you go and take Back to the Future and you connect some feelings that you get from Wizard of Oz, which precedes it, and Pleasantville, which came after it, to where you see this director's emotional take that they're weaving in that you don't even realize as a viewer. You're just watching a show, but they're able to evoke some emotions similar to Wizard of Oz, similar to Back to the Future, similar to Pleasantville, with this same tactic, and kind of weave it in. So it shows the importance of the directors and the choices and the colors and things that we talk about on this show. It shows the importance of those things.
Justin, you were going to say something.
Oh, it's not super relevant. I'm super sad that the DeLorean doors don't actually make that noise, Craig. Why did you do that?
Sorry.
It's crushing.
Like, I'm sure if I thought about it, I would have realized it.
They make the DeLorean sound like a spaceship, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's it. Yeah.
Well, so I read that I think it was Ford, when they're making their new electric Mustangs, they've actually put in speakers that will make like
Yep.
the revving up noise of an actual engine. And I just think we need that for a DeLorean. Like, we need a speaker to make those noises every time the door opens.
You know what? You were onto something there, because I would take my beat up minivan outside and I would turn it into a DeLorean sounding car if I could do that.
Ooh,
That
this
would
is
be
a
the-
I mean,
project.
I know that that's a thing that electric car manufacturers have to do. They have to have some sort of sound because it's so that pedestrians are aware of the car being nearby, right?
Sure.
And I bet as time goes on, we'll get cooler and crazier sounding. Because it's like,
Why
as long
not?
as the sky's the limit, why would you not have a car that sounds like the Millennium Falcon?
Oh my
Exactly.
gosh!
Say we
Exactly.
have to have engine noises. We could just have
X-Wing.
spaceship noises.
Oh, I want the TARDIS from Doctor Who. I am on this.
Love it. Anything else on sound? Or are we good to move to performance? Cool. All right, let's talk about performance. So we usually start with lines of dialogue because that's just fun. So you told me you had a story earlier. I don't know if you want to jump in now and tell me, or just talk about. Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you the story now. I texted Craig before the show just to ask if it was okay. So one of the iconic lines from this movie, right, is when this baby hits 88 miles an hour, you're going to see some serious shit, right? And so when I wrote my adaptation of this, I don't remember exactly how I did it, and my books had never had a curse word in them before, but I said something like, thou shalt see shit most serious, something like that. And so, because I was like, you can't mess around with that. Like, you got to keep that. And especially in a Shakespearean context, it just makes it funnier, right? To have that word suddenly showing up there. And so we got into the proofs of the book. It had been approved by my publisher. It had been approved by Universal, and we got to the proofs, and I looked, and all of a sudden I saw that the proof said, "Thou shalt see stuff most serious." And
Oh,
No.
yeah, exactly. So imagine my 80s ire being erased there. So I wrote to my publisher and was in this really awkward position, which I'm sure made my parents so proud of, advocating to have the word, in the book.
oh my gosh.
It's
How did
different.
yeah, it is. It's different, right? So anyway,
Wait, so what does the book say? Is it
so
stuff?
the book says shit.
Okay.
So I prevailed in that argument.
Nice.
I
did it.
made my
You did
book
it.
have a bad word. Woo!
Not all heroes wear capes. Well done.
That's right.
I gotta say, I just wrote that line down because I was like, that is an amazing line. I think I
too.
may say it from that way from now on. I'm going to promote the book, and I'm going to say that is the best way to say that line.
There you go.
Well, and his
So
delivery
anyway,
of that
that's-
line too, because he's always so dramatic and outrageous in the way he talks, but right there he's so serious.
Yeah, it's so good.
Well, there's a cockiness in Doc that you see in that one moment that you
Yep.
don't
Yeah.
see anywhere else. Just
Well, you
like-
see it. I would say you
eyes.
see it one other time, which is roads. Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Yes.
Right? It's that
Yes.
same tone of watch this.
That's true. Yeah, that's why those are great lines. Corey, you want to go next?
Yeah, and I'm going to take this a little different because with the dialogue, I think I'm going to highlight two people that I think Crispin Glover, who plays George, and Tom Wilson, who plays Biff, are the two characters that have to play entirely different characters. The same character, but they have to play very different mannerisms than everybody else. I mean, Marty gets to be Marty the whole time. Doc gets to be Doc the whole time. He's a younger and older version, but it's not someone different. But Crispin Glover, the level of being George McFly in high school to George McFly as an adult whose life has turned out not as well, and as Marty's embarrassment to
Well, he
the
actually
very
does
end
three.
to be the confident, I'm the author of, A Match Made in Space. So it's absolutely a brilliant level of dialogue for them to pull off those voice inflections, to pull off what they do and say and sound and make you believable and not come across cheesy, not come across where you're like, oh gosh, dang, this guy's hard to watch. And even Biff to go and play nerdy Biff at the end, who is now the kind of humbled Biff, is quite different than walking in, grabbing a beer out of their fridge and George, I need you to do my work for me because I work in the office with you, kind of thing, and still riding his coattails. So I think when you look at that, those levels of dialogue are very, very much a large scale of acting that deserves to be noted beyond the two characters that we love and our fan favorites, Marty and Doc.
Nice. Justin, do you have a favorite line you wanted to point out?
Favorite
or one
line?
of them?
Oh, yes. I just Googled it because I had to get the exact wording. But there are so many little tiny lines that connect to other points of the movie, like little, I don't know, like callbacks, Easter eggs. I don't know what you would call them, but you wouldn't pick them up maybe on the first time viewing, or at least I wouldn't. But the amount of times where Marty says heavy, and every time he says heavy, the Doc's like, what? But just that line, heavy. Why are things so heavy in the future? Is there a problem with the Earth's gravitational pull? Like, I love that line so much. Because it's never really addressed. He's just like, what's going on with that?
No.
So anytime that's mentioned, as well as anytime somebody mentions Marty's jacket and like mentions how he's in port from the Navy or something like that. They never really fully address it. He just kind of goes with it at one point. He just accepts it. I love that so much. Just any interaction between like Marty and the Doc. Their chemistry is so good, and I don't know how many takes they had to do, but I'm sure they had to be laughing off of each other almost that entire time. And then just generally, George McFly, Crispin Glover, he's a creepy dude. Like, he makes you feel uncomfortable. Like, especially in the 50s, I like whenever he's on screen, I'm like, please just stop, just get off screen, please. And he does a great job at being creepy and kind of pervy at the same time. But yeah, kind of like what Corey mentioned, like he plays three pretty distinct characters. Oh, and then that laugh at the beginning of the movie when he's laughing at the TV, that is just disgustingly wonderful.
There it was.
I love that.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Justin. I'll make that
Nice.
your ringtone.
Yeah.
I have a couple. I'm just going to give one and then give you guys another chance to round through. Like I said, I saw this movie as a kid. This line did not stick with me until much, much later. I might have even been a teacher at the time. I'm not sure, but it's when Marty's grandpa, when Marty gets up from the table and Marty's grandpa says, he's an idiot, comes from upbringing. His parents are probably idiots too.
That was a great line.
Is such a great line and so true.
So true.
So many times.
So many times in life I've said that.
So it just hits differently now.
He's an idiot. Oh, love it.
So,
And,
Ian,
Craig, I've
go ahead.
known you for a number of years, and that just that is such a perfect encapsulation of what I know about you and how you feel.
It's not like you were born an idiot. You were just raised to be one.
Idiot. It comes from upbringing.
Yeah.
Now it makes me wonder how many people are saying that about my kids.
Oh.
I think we might all be in danger of that.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any other lines they want to just drop in, just rapid fire?
I mean, as long as we're talking about performances, I mean, I will stand up for Crispin Glover being the highlight acting wise of this movie. There are just so many subtle things, and I mean, my understanding is that he's kind of a weird guy in real life, but his performance in this is just astounding. And there's a moment that I only picked up on when I was working on my book, where it's when Biff first walks into the diner in the 50s, and he's sort of, his focus is on George at first, but then Marty sort of gets up in his face a little bit, and Biff makes a joke at Marty's expense, and you see George like try to laugh along, like, yeah, see, look, I'm one of the guys too, right? Isn't this other guy terrible? Like, just trying so hard to avoid the situation, the bad situation with Biff. And it's just brilliant, because I feel like that's something another actor might have missed, right? Like the opportunity to do that. I will also say that I remember hearing once with regard to Seinfeld, that Seinfeld was sort of like that Seinfeld was funny because Jerry Seinfeld, for as like crazy and whatever fun as he is almost like the straight man in Seinfeld, right?
Right.
And that's true of Marty McFly in Back to the Future, right? Like as kind of fun and wild as Michael J. Fox can be, and he is at times in this movie, right? But like there is so much going on around him with Biff and Lorraine and George and Doc, all of them that he really sort of becomes that straight man in a lot of scenes. Yeah.
That's a great point, because I don't think Marty is funny because he necessarily says funny things, or it's just his mannerisms and the way he walks and things happen in his emotions. He carries them well, and it's kind of a chaotic, unintentional funny. Like there's chaos around me and things going on around me, and it's funny. We're enjoying it, but it's him reacting. I don't know. It's not. He doesn't say punchlines. He doesn't throw things out that do that, but he does it so well.
Well, and he is very much acting for the audience as well. It's almost as if the other actors, like he is there to show us how to feel, not necessarily. It's almost like he's not playing off the other actors, because if the other people in character were watching him react to things, they'd be like, "What's wrong with your face? Why are you constantly looking so shocked?"
Right.
But they just kind of play it off cool because he is in a constant state of surprise.
Yeah. I got one I'm going to throw out there, and this is one that my wife and I have said back and forth to each other for years, is the "you're my density." When George says that in the diner scene, is my wife and I, you always have a little sweet party when you leave and go to work or something, or, you sitting there and you're just, I was just always like, I love that line because he's like, "You're my density. I mean, destiny." And so it's just been a line that we have thrown back and forth at each other all the time, is just to mess that line up and say, "You're my density," which is, so it's because overall the whole movie's not too quotable as far as, iconic quotes that you can always throw out in any scene. There's several quotes, but that's one that I just, for whatever reason, is one that sticks out to me that we use all the time.
There's another one that I wrote down today. Again, it's Marty's grandpa, Lorraine's dad. After he hits Marty McFly with the car, he says, "Another one of these damn kids jumped in front of my car," right? It's a throwaway line, like you don't think that, but like it suggests so many layers of story. Like how many kids has he hit with his car, right? And like it's not addressed at all, but it's so good. It's just like
there's just
He's
so
great.
like kind of back to the heavy line. There's a lot of throwaway lines where it's like, no, let's pull on that thread a little bit more. I want to know more about that, or just with the radiation suit when Doc says like, of course, radiation suit because of the atomic wars,
Right.
and he never follows up on that question. That seems like it would be important.
Yeah, I caught something. Speaking of radiation suits, I was going to mention this later, but now is a perfect time. I had the subtitles on because I like to just maybe I can catch one more thing. And it's like the 100th time I watched it. When Marty first sees Doc in the radiation suit, he says, "Is that a Devo suit?"
Yeah,
which is great because that's Justin's like looking.
No, I know it. I know. Exactly
okay, Devo, the band from the 80s, right?
Yeah. Google it.
With the flower pots in their heads.
I had to look up the reference that's another one. When I do my books, I figure out what every line of dialogue is, right? Because I have to address it. And yeah, I had no idea what Devo was, honestly. So,
whip it good.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
there you go. Yeah.
Okay, I know.
When a problem comes along, you must whip it.
The music video.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, now I have that. So I love the part where he's wearing that suit with Crispin Glover, and he says, "I am Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan," and he throws that in there, which is just a great way to, Ian, could we ask how'd that line get in there? What'd you do with that line where "I am Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan"? Is that?
Yeah, you can ask, and if you give me 2 seconds, I'll be able to tell you. I don't have it memorized, but I do have it on my computer. So. So the way I did it, I didn't have the actual scene. So instead I have George recounting what happened to Marty, right? Yeah. Rather than have the scene. So he says, At last it spoke. Be silent, earthling weak. Darth Vader am I called, of strength and power, an extraterrestrial from Vulcan come. It made a sign then with its claw-like hand, which hypnotized me by some sorcery and bent my mind that I might do its will. And then I put in Star Wars and Star Trek references, right? The strange and unrelenting force it used surrounded me and shall be with me always. I'll not live long and prosper if I should ignore the message it hath brought to me.
Nice.
That is absolutely incredible and genius level. I mean, that is
Easter egg.
amazing. That is.
Thanks. I mean, it's, you know, so good for Bob Gale to take those two things and you know, combine them in this like fun, just sort of overall alien appearance.
Yeah.
Beautiful. My last one is actually kind of serious, but I thought it was really interesting this time. It's the line I mentioned it earlier. If you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. But I thought what was interesting with this one was the progression, because the first time you hear it, it's Marty saying it kind of sarcastically because his girlfriend Jennifer is like, "Remember what your dad always, or what Doc always says." It came from Doc, right? And he kind of says it, yeah, you know, and then he says it sincerely to George. He looks around the eye, puts his hand on his shoulder, and then it's repeated from George back to Marty at the end. So it's kind of been redeemed this way, because Marty's on this, you know, he's on this journey. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end as well, where he's kind of, and he doesn't believe in himself, and he doesn't believe that maxim is true. But by the time we get to the end, it's not only has he believe it, he's imparted that to his dad, who in turn is now imparting that to his kids.
I love that. One last thing, sorry,
No.
with this, because we're talking about characters here and or you know, the dialogue and things. Do you think that, I mean, Eric Stoltz was the original character who was supposed to play Marty, and they had filmed, you know, a third to half of that before they sat down and switched him with Michael J. Fox. Do you think I think those lines and things, because I've seen little clips here and there, you know, through different videos, it does hit different. It's very different delivery. It really shows the importance of that. And I think just how that Michael J. Fox isn't just the line that he delivers. There's some physical acting that he's doing in there, and his character and mannerisms that Stoltz didn't have. That Stoltz is a great actor too. I've seen him in a few things, but it just shows the importance of that, so that you know that you get more than, it's not just a line or reading a line or saying a script, that there's a lot to it. But
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I had that under body language too, his physicality, especially in the scenes with young Lorraine, where he's just squirmy as all get, just like in the car, and he's shrinking down. And, you know, he has to do that because like it's disgusting, right? This whole theme is pretty gross. So, but it's played for laughs because of his performance. You know, he sells it so well. The look of shock on his face and on her face too, when she does it too, with the eyes get wide, and a lot of things just being communicated without dialogue there.
Yeah, and it's doubly good because not only is he uncomfortable because of because of the situation he's in and having to act this way, but also at the same time he's like learning things about his mom and how she behaved, right?
Too?
So good.
don't be a square.
Especially because at the beginning of that line, "Were you born a nun?" And then she's terrible.
I think she was born a nun. Yeah, so good. Anything else? Costumes, hair, makeup that we haven't touched on? The only thing I noticed new this time was Strickland actually has some hair in the 50s. It's always been there, but I just never noticed. Yeah, he does on the sides.
Oh.
I think go ahead.
Oh, no, you're fine.
I think that one of the reasons this movie continues to hold up so well is that the 80s scenes, especially I'm thinking about like Jennifer, her hairstyle and stuff like that, like it feels like the 80s, right? But the 50s feels timeless because, of course, it's, you know, I mean, the 50s was the 50s for the 80s in the same way the 50s is the 50s for us. So, which is a weird sentence I just said. But I think that's why, like, this movie visually does not feel dated to me. Right. And I think a lot of that has to do with just how classic the 50s looks. And that the 80s are, I mean, you notice it in places, but it's not overdone. It doesn't feel like, you know, like Fatal Attraction or Working Girl or like one of these movies where like the 80s of it is screaming at you.
Yeah, it didn't feel stylized when it came out. Like this is like I could walk down the street. I'm from Northern California, which is, this is like supposedly some part of California. A lot of it's filmed in Southern California, but it looks familiar to me as I walk outside. It doesn't look like, where's this weird place we're at? So
yeah, the modern time of 1985 kind of fits with 2023. Like you really could have that. That does not have to be 1985. It could be any time, except for his Coast Guard life vest that he wears in 1985. We don't wear those anymore, but
No, people wear those. Like,
are they coming back? Oh,
no,
okay.
I just saw someone this weekend wearing one, and I was like, hey.
Would you jump ship, sailor?
I wonder. I feel like we should have gotten somebody's grandpa on this episode to comment on the authenticity of the 50s. I wonder how good of a job they did, because you can all like relate. Craig, you were saying you could relate to how that looked, but I wonder if there was anyone on set being like, in the 50s, it didn't look like that.
Is it movies 50s? Which is that's a good transition into setting and design too. It's filmed on a back lot. It's filmed in Universal Studios. You can take the tour and go through Hill Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there is something very synthetic about it and something kind of sanitized. It's an idealized 1950s for sure.
But they make such good use of that set.
Oh yeah, it looks huge.
Yeah.
But I remember going on certain tours and go through. There's the clock tower, which is fun. But yeah, a lot of it filmed. I mentioned earlier. I'm not going to go through the list, but Gar Van Orden, who's I'm Facebook friends with, and he listens to the show occasionally, took his kids on a tour. He posted Facebook pictures of like Twin Pine Mall and all of these different places. You can go see a lot of these places, which is pretty awesome. But let's move down to set decoration. Anything in set decoration or props that really stood out to you guys?
I got one I'm going to throw out there because I think we always talk recently, last few episodes, about the payoffs, like something that's introduced early on that is a payoff later. And I think if I'm going to talk about payoffs in Back to the Future, it's going to be, how they always, everything, the time periods always go back to 1955. Back to Future 1, 2, and 3, there's always a 1955 in there. And they make a comment about, it's amazing that Biff would have chose that date in Back to the Future 2. And he said, maybe it's a nexus of some universal constant or something, 1955. And the payoff for me is to think, well, what are other things that come up in all three movies? And the diner scene is something that comes up in all three. That diner scene in 1, diner scene in 2, and it's the saloon in 3 is the same diner. And then the clock tower, the importance of the clock tower through each one. And so the set is the same Hill Valley, that same square, the skateboard scene, the hoverboard scene, and then getting dragged by Biff's horse scene. Like it's the same characters in all these things. That's the payoff. It's the same characters, same families, just a different timeline with the same story of, who's in charge, all these different conflicts they have. And so I think you look at the set decorations of all that, and it's just amazing payoff through a trilogy that is kind of hard to write around, but they do it so well in this.
Like, it's interesting to see how that has changed through the time periods, and you can stop and pause and look at it and be like, oh, okay, they changed this. The clock tower looks a little different. That building looks different. That's always fun to watch.
Yeah, the McFly house too. Like that, the decoration inside there is kind of kitschy and cheesy and cheap in the original version. Then he gets back the second time, and everything's shiny and supposedly expensive.
Yeah, I was going to say that shot was lost on me as a kid, right? When it like shows their like living room and he's noticing that it looks all nice. That was totally lost on me as a kid. I didn't get that shot.
I have a big question about that shot though, and there's no really good category for it, so I'm just going to put it here. So, do his older brother and sister, they still live at home, and yet they're somehow successful? And it's like 10:30 it's like almost 11 o'clock, and he's like, I always wear a suit to the office, and I think it's a Saturday. I don't know. I'm really confused.
Weekend, and he's going to work. Like,
we're gonna assume he's the CEO, so he can go in whenever he wants to.
Yeah, okay.
And he lives somewhere. He lives in his mansion somewhere else. He's just stopping by for breakfast with his parents.
I'm good with that.
Good question. Yeah. Fun prop thing that I'm fairly certain. So I've seen Everything Everywhere All at Once a couple of times now, and I'm pretty sure. I don't know if you guys have seen that or not. I'm pretty sure that at one point No, none of the three of you have seen it.
It's on my list, but I haven't
We're
seen
going
it.
to stop the recording of the podcast right now. I'll see you guys back here in like 2.5 hours. Do yourselves a favor. Well, when you see it, there is a scene where the grandfather character in Everything Everywhere All at Once, he has sort of all these contraptions on his wheelchair, and I'm pretty darn sure there's a Mr. Fusion on the back of his wheelchair. It's just a tiny little Easter egg, but would be totally keeping with the movie and what it does. So
it is. I just Googled that.
That's awesome.
I absolutely love, and I feel this way when I watch any movie from this time period. And I remember when I watched the prequel movies, the Star Wars prequels, I was sad that
Gotta be specific now.
I gotta be specific here. I was sad that it had lost us a little bit, but I feel like movies from the 80s, like the props and the set decorations, everything feels very used and lived in and dingy and dirty. And it feels more real. Like back to the scene at the very beginning as it's going through Doc's workshop. Like there is so much stuff in there. So much stuff that looks like it's been used. And I don't know if guys like on the set, they're just like, hey guys, go grab your toolbox. We're going to set it down. Like I don't know how they acquired all that stuff or like how much of a setup process that was. But it's just, I really like seeing all that stuff. And it doesn't look like a prop. It looks like somebody actually used that toolbox or box of plutonium. Hopefully not. Or just in the DeLorean itself, like there's so many like knobs and buttons and flashy lights. And
Flux
I just love
capacitor.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I got a story about the flux capacitor. So, I worked at Radio Shack once upon a time in my early 20s. And I don't know if it was like a local joke or if this was a thing people like to do to bully Radio Shack employees, but this happened at least once a week. People love to walk in and be like, excuse me, sir, do you have any flux capacitors? And they wanted the response of like the employee looking for a flux capacitor, not knowing what it was. But every single time I'm just like, no, like get out. I know what that is. This isn't fun. And it was in a mall, so it was usually just people like passing by and then they'd leave and they'd like laugh on their way out. I'm like, oh, you guys are so funny. I haven't heard that 7 times. Stop it.
Nice.
So now I just hate that word flux.
Sorry.
But no, like the future I was promised was that there would be flashing lights and little buttons to press on all sorts of technology. And now we've just gotten to smartphones where everything's a touchscreen and it's so much less fun.
Star
I'm upset
Trek.
about that.
Sorry, man.
Yeah, I want buttons.
So I have a question because for not you, Justin, because you're too young, but for the other three, did you have a skateboard after this movie, or did you ride or borrow a skateboard after this movie? Did you have to have one?
This. How many kids out there broke arms because of this movie?
I needed a skateboard and got one.
I wanted one too.
I'm going to insert myself into this anyway, Craig. I did have a skateboard after this movie.
Okay, good. Okay,
It'd be
good.
a decade after, but
I tried it. I fell. I never rode a skateboard. So
I didn't ride it very much.
I'm helpless on anything that requires my balance. So yeah, I didn't. My brother had a skateboard. I never did. I always thought it was so cool though. I mean, this movie, and even today, I mean, the scene, talk about, we've been calling it a perfect movie, but talk about perfect scenes, right? This scene with the car and the skateboard outside the diner in 1955, right, is just such a perfect action sequence. And that moment when, they're pushing Marty toward the manure truck and he slips out, and the skateboard goes under, like,
Yep.
Come on. Right. When I was a kid, I was just blown away.
Yeah. I was going to mention this earlier.
I have
There's a thing too what they do that Silvestri does with the score at that point too. The main theme's playing, but I think it's playing like a minor key or something. This is like he's in danger, and then once he gets out, and it kicks back up into the regular version. But just brilliant.
So I didn't understand that minor key. I don't understand what the tone
I mean, I'm not a big music guy.
Someone out there was like, "Ooh, wow!"
Soundtrack show is
key.
back now, though, so
Yeah.
you guys can learn. Check that out. That's a great show.
Speaking of props, one last
Go
thing.
for it.
So Tom Wilson is he has a video on YouTube of him singing a guitar song. He's quite a good singer too, by the way.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And he sings a song about Back to the Future because that's all he's known for, and that's what people come up to him and so he sings a song about questions that he gets asked all the time about Back to the Future. And one of the things he says that people always ask him, was that real manure? And he said, no, it wasn't. But and I got to admit, the texture and what it looked like, I grew up on a farm. It looked like real manure. So they do a great job on the prop there.
Yeah. So Ian, you mentioned that scene was a perfect scene. Is that one or the one from Back to the Future more perfect? Or Back to the Future 2, sorry.
I mean, I am not as big of a fan of Back to the Future 2 and 3 as I am of the original. Oh. So I'm always going to choose the original. I know. There's my maybe unpopular hot take.
But history repeats itself. And so
it's like
if you
poetry,
think about
it rhymes.
It rhymes to have him do that again.
Yes.
Yeah. Corey, as a history teacher, that phrase offends me.
I'm sorry, but it's true. It's true.
All right, I want to bring up a couple of product placement things before we get out of this section. The JVC camcorder, but I really want to mention it because I had to look this up. Like, could you actually hook that up to a TV in the 50s? And apparently you could, as long as you have antenna screws. So that's kind of cool.
Doc would have had that, certainly.
He would have figured that out.
He's an inventor.
And then I've always thought, as many times as I've seen, except for this last time, that it was a Walkman that Marty was using and put the headphones on George. It's not. It's an AWA cassette player, because they make a point of showing you the label, and like that's some pretty great product placement right there for them. Nice job.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah. I mean, of course, there's super important props in this film. Like, we don't always have important props, but like, or ones that are easily pulled out. But obviously, the picture of Marty and his siblings is huge, and as well as the flyer. So they have those two things that are like crucial to the plot. You know.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen without those.
I was reflecting today what a good device the photo is, right? To show sort of the danger that Marty's in, and
showing instead of telling is just great.
Yeah.
You know, if there was one thing about this movie that frustrated me, it was actually the amount of product placement. It's, especially at the beginning, it's very distracting. There's so much of it.
Yeah.
We don't even have any more Pepsi Free. They always talk about Pepsi Free in there.
Yeah. There's a lot of Pepsi Free.
Is Tab still around?
Give me a tab. You want a tab, you're going to pay for it. What'd you say to each other?
You haven't ordered anything yet, yeah. All right. Characters. Are any characters we have not talked about? I don't know if we've missed anybody or not. I think we're pretty good.
I mean, that question, the first character who popped in my head was Goldie Wilson, which we don't see a lot of him.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, again, if I had to find a quibble or two with this movie, right, it's treatment of time travel, and this is, I mean, Avengers like mocked this anyway, right? Its treatment of time travel is inconsistent. Let's put it that way, right? In some senses, in some ways, it feels like what Marty does changes things, and in other ways, it feels like Marty has already been there,
right?
Like the original 1985 has already benefited from Marty being there.
Right, because he's the one that gives him the idea to run for mayor. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and gives Lorraine the idea to name her son Marty. And I mean, you know, all of these things, of course, could have happened other ways, right? But even thinking about like you know, the sort of what has become a somewhat controversial scene of you know, Chuck Berry getting the idea for rock and roll music, you know, because of Marty's performance, right?
Right.
So like even that sort of is inconsistent with the idea of some of the things he does are changing history.
It's always so tricky though. Like you can't do a time travel movie without opening yourself up to plot holes. Like I can't think of a time travel movie that isn't riddled with plot holes, right?
So I think they all are, but I have to say, as a big fan of movies and love sci-fi movies, and I mean, I've watched Star Trek when they go in time travel, and Sound of Thunder, a B movie that I absolutely love with time travel, Doctor Who, all of these. It was not until the Avengers came out that I really stopped and said, wait a minute, they just discounted all this time travel. And I thought, I had so many discussions, I think with Craig and with everybody. I was like, wait a minute. That's not how time travel works. No. Like I think all of America and the world is looking at the way Back to the Future treated time travel is how time travel works. You change something there, it's going to change in the future. And so I think it's brilliant because it created some conversations from the Avengers. So I was like, wait a minute. I cannot understand and grasp what the Hulk just said. I need to redo that.
And Avengers has some funny logic with that too. Like
Yeah.
the directors and the writers argue about where Steve went and how he shows up at the end. But yeah, there's always
It
something.
doesn't work no matter.
Yeah,
what
it
movie
doesn't
does
work.
it.
Well, they didn't just disagree. Whatever. I had one thing that I thought was interesting because I've always wondered how old Doc Brown is supposed to be. And so Christopher Lloyd is about 47 when they're filming. And so I guess he's supposed to be late 70s in the 80s, I guess, because he looks exactly the same in the 50s, which is funny. And then, of course, they played it off as a joke in the second one where he, got the face peel and stuff. And
he was on an episode
slightly different
of Taxi a few years before this. And
he was on Taxi. He was a regular on Taxi.
And he was a cab driver, and he was talking about seeing the future and time travel in that.
Oh, nice.
And he had brown hair, dark hair. Anyway, it was just very different. And then I was thinking, wait, just 4 years later, he's doing Doc Brown. It's a very different feel. But
Corey, I think this is the perfect time for you to have some sort of theory. This is usually where something comes about, some conspiracy within the movie.
A fan theory that Corey makes up on the spot.
Theory, yeah.
Here's my fan theory. You got it? Are you ready for this? I have a fan theory. The guy who was supposed to originally play Marty, Eric Stoltz, was in Back to the Future, but because Marty went back in time and changed things, we have a new version. Because George was unsuccessful, now George is successful.
Yeah.
And the fan theory is that there's two Marty McFlys, and
Corey, I love
Marty
it.
changed it. There you go.
I will say this. So we've been rewatching the show Fringe in my house because my kids had never seen it, and Jody and I hadn't seen it since it first aired. And there's parallel universes in that, and in the parallel universe there is Back to the Future starring Eric Stoltz. We watched that just the other day, and I was like, "What great timing!" And I had got to explain, "Hey, there's the thing."
It's
so in a parallel universe, Corey, that
right.
movie got made.
Someday we're just gonna have like a spin-off podcast where we just talk about
fan theories. I love it.
You just do that in the Facebook group and leave it there. All right, hero's journey. Let's talk about the hero's journey, Marty's journey in this. Ian, I'm going to come back to you. What do you think about Marty's journey, his character development?
You guys doing this podcast are more up on your hero's journey than I am. So I had to do some Googling of like, remind me a little bit about what the hero's journey is. So I will say, if we're talking sort of the traditional journey, the traditional steps and that sort of thing, there are a lot of ways that Marty lines up perfectly and a lot of ways that he doesn't. And I think the one contribution that I might make to this conversation is to say, I think George McFly is having his own hero's journey alongside Marty in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't go through like all of the steps of the monomyth or anything. I just really liked the fact that Marty's kind of learning to believe in himself because he takes on a mentor role, that he takes that on to become his own, to go on his own journey. Like he can't finish his own until he kind of steps out of himself to mentor George. I thought that was an interesting kind of switch of things.
The one part I thought on the
learn
heroes
stuff on this podcast. Thanks.
Say that again, Justin.
I always learn stuff on this podcast. I didn't pick up on that. Good stuff.
The death of the mentor. Doc Brown does die.
Yes, he does.
And technically, when he goes back in time, it's to him, it's a ghost of Doc Brown because Doc Brown dies. And so he writes the letter for Doc in the future to try and prevent the death. Anyway, but I thought of that point because I thought, well, where's the death of a mentor? And I thought, oh, no, he watched Doc Brown die. So there's the death of the mentor.
Yeah, another important prop.
So basically what we're saying here is that Doc Brown is Qui-Gon, and that makes Marty Obi-Wan, and that makes George Anakin. Okay.
Kind of. Yes, but Marty's also somehow Luke at the same time.
Yeah, it's Doc
Yeah,
Brown.
well, that's right. That was the
Marty's
other.
Luke.
Yeah.
And that would make Rey.
I don't know. Marty's daughter? I don't know.
Yeah, Marty's daughter.
I lost it.
Yeah, it's gone.
It's gone.
So does Doc in the original timeline, is he wearing the bulletproof vest?
Now that's where time travel gets tricky, Justin.
Gets a little fuzzy.
So we don't have an answer for that one. All right.
According to the bell that happens, no. the little chime happens when he comes up and sees him looking dead.
See, there you go.
But
Okay.
did Doc already have that? And in the first timeline,
Yeah, it's not like Terminator. It's not a time loop.
see. And according to Loki and the Time TVA, is that there's a sacred timeline.
Stop with that. Oh, Lord. All right. World building. We've talked a lot about this. Is there anything we need to add to world building? Anything we haven't touched on? I mean,
No.
I don't know if there was that much product placement in the 80s or not, but
No, but I think the payoff, though, that I mentioned earlier is the world building. The fact that they have these same scenes, the clock tower, the diner, the Hill Valley Square, that repeat themselves through 3 movies and do it in a way to where you love the movies. Not all of us, but where you love all 3, and like to see that payoff come out and still be a world building, throughout 3 different generations.
yeah, it's something similar. I just mentioned the fact that the movie rewards you for paying attention. And I always love that.
Lone
Yeah,
Pine
this is
Mall.
not a movie you can watch while being on your smartphone.
Yeah.
Gotta put your phone down.
We need more of these. Get off your phones, kids. All right. Final thoughts on Back to the Future. Ian, we're going to start with you.
Oh boy, I don't know that I have much more to say than what I've said. The time travel, I said I had a quibble about how it handles time travel. I will also say that it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter, and it doesn't hurt this movie. And it makes me think of the scene in, I think it's Austin Powers 2, where he goes back in time and he has the little conversation with Basil Exposition, and and Basil Exposition is basically like, I suggest you just don't worry about that. And then he looks to the camera and he says, and that goes for you too. Right? And it's like, that's a little bit what I feel like this movie is doing. Like, you know what? Let's just enjoy this.
Absolutely.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Justin, what about you? Final thoughts on Back to the Future?
I'd agree. Unfortunately, sometimes when I'm prepping for this podcast, I look at the films almost as if I'm trying to review them and not necessarily look for deeper meaning. So I have to get myself out of that mindset. But unfortunately, I didn't for this film, and I tried to be really critical of it. And it's just so hard. Like, there's so much attention to detail. Whoever was in charge of making sure things lined up on set did a fantastic job, because you notice so much more every time you watch this film. Like, it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And then it only expands further as you watch 2 and 3. But I mean, there's a reason this film and this trilogy is a classic. Like, it is in every single one of these categories that we talked about. It is solid. It's not lacking at any point. And at no point in the movie do you feel bored, even after dozens of rewatches. Yep. You are engaged and interested in the characters and just all of it. It's fantastic.
Corey?
I'm going to echo what I said in the beginning. This movie is all about nostalgia and feeling instantly teleported back as you watch it now. If for those of us that were able to watch it in the theaters or when we were kids, you instantly get time traveled back to that moment. I think newer generations just appreciate it because it's just a good, fun story. It holds up well. And I think when you look at Back to the Future, the references it has in pop culture, popularity, Big Bang Theory, the Avengers movie. I mean, the way that it just has become part of who we are. Chicago Cubs finally winning a World Series. How epic that is. I mean, all of these things, 2015 actually happened, and we were all talking about Back to the Future then. I just probably got rewatched. That movie got rewatched probably around that time more than any other. And then Michael J. Fox and his struggles with Parkinson's and seeing how heroic he's been and how forefront he's been throughout his career and how beloved him and Doc are. You know, just the way that they are as characters is absolutely wonderful. They just had a show they did a while ago where they were on it together and they came out and hugged. I'm not kidding. I'm a 46-year-old man watching this from this movie that, you know, these characters, and I was watching, I was tearing I was like, oh my gosh, look at this. It's so emotional, you know, because it's such a beautiful duo to see. And so when you watch that, you feel that, and you just love these characters. You love these actors who did this. Michael J. Fox, just saw an interview today with him on TikTok. Someone was playing where he was just a couple years ago, was in the house, went into the living room and was flipping through the channels, and it was on. And he sat down and watched it. And his family was like, "Where's he been?" He's gone for 30 minutes. They came in and found him. "What are you doing?" "I'm watching Back to the Future."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Man, this is such a great show." And so he just loved it. And it's, here he was in the movie, but he was enjoying it and loving it. And so it just shows you how important this movie is, and how this is such a popular, I'm going to say probably best, if not the best, one of the top 3 trilogies of all time.
It's back to that. Yeah, I love this movie, and I think most people do. Like, it has so much heart in it, and we love these characters. It's so well put together. And something I was struck by a couple of rewatches, because I watch this multiple times a year, was that there's really not a villain. I mean, Biff kind of is, but not in a way that's like you can't beat him. The real antagonist in this film, the only time there really is an antagonist, I think, is in that last scene where it's actually time itself. Not to go super esoteric on you, but really, I mean, he's got one chance to get, the DeLorean to hit the lightning bolt and all that stuff. And that's the only time where there's really like, this is a thing I don't know if I can beat, is that. And I think that also lends to the fact that we all can kind of identify with that, and we just feel good. Like, we all are struggling with time is the only enemy we really can't fight. But it's so sweet and such, like I said, so much heart. It's hard not to love this movie.
Well, and how true is that, right? Time is the only thing that we can't beat. It's the thing that's going to get us all in the end.
Yeah.
All right, Ian. Before we let you go, is there? Hold on, dude. Is there anything, Ian, that you would like to plug? Anything you can tell us about that you have? It's coming up.
I have nothing to plug. I can tell you that if you are looking for a Shakespearean adaptation of Back to the Future, you could find it. It's out there.
It's in my classroom. I've enjoyed all of the Shakespearean adaptations. I'm still working my way through the Avengers one because that one's a little thick.
It is.
The last one I picked up. But good stuff. Yeah, and I'll have links to your website and your social media stuff in the show notes.
Thanks.
And we'll pass it along. So as we close, we just want to say thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook, email us at readingbetweenreels@gmail.com, or use the SpeakPipe app on our website. If you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend, and support us by writing a review on your favorite podcast catcher. Our next episode will be a review of Guardians of the Galaxy with special guest Adam Bray. And as you know, we are giving one lucky listener a digital copy of the Back to the Future trilogy tonight. All you had to do was look for the pinned tweet on our Twitter profile and like and retweet the tweet to enter. And the winner of the digital copy of Back to the Future trilogy is Ross Holliban. Congratulations, Ross. Be sure to direct message us on Twitter, and we'll send you the code for the digital copy. And we have another announcement. During each of our next several episodes, we will be giving away a digital copy of each of the previously released Mission Impossible movies. For our next episode, we will be giving one lucky listener a digital copy of Mission Impossible, the first one. All you have to do to enter is leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast by Tuesday, 4/25/23. Also, be sure to email us after you've left the review so that we know how to contact you. The winner will be announced on the next episode of Reading Between the Reels. And if you'd like to contribute to our next show, send us an email or voicemail about your favorite moments from Guardians of the Galaxy, and we'll share it on the next episode.